This week, we're taking my old recipe book and we're turning it into something more beautiful. I'm going to take you through the process of making a book start to finish in less than 20 minutes. And if you stick around to the end, I'm going to go through a few of the do's, a few of the don'ts, a few of the things that I've learned. So please stick around. So what are the steps in making a book? Plan the layout of your book, including text, images, and any other content, and then edit and proofread the content thoroughly. I spent months putting together the content of this recipe book and in editing it. The next step is determine the page layout. You need to plan the layout of your book, including the number of pages per signature. So what is a signature? Signatures or sections or folios, which they can often be called, refer to the groups of pages that are printed or folded together before being bound. And this is what I'm doing here. I've created my signatures and I'm folding them currently. I've set my signatures or each section of the book to 16 pages. So which would be 4 pages folded in half, or call it 4 pages, 4 book pages per leaf, which makes it 16 pages per signature that I'm making here. After the signatures are folded, we're going to put them in a book press overnight to flatten the signatures and to, let's call it, to seal in the fold. This will aid in the alignment. The edges of the pages will ensure that they are flush and uniform, which is crucial for a neat and tiny final product. Next, I'm going to puncture the signatures with an awl to create the slots to sew the book together. I'm using a stitching cradle. I made this a little while ago. It's a simple construction. I didn't make a video on how to create the stitching cradle, but if you search it up on YouTube, there are a number of videos. I'm making a template out of cardboard as to where to puncture the holes in the signatures. I'm setting it 12 centimeters from the head of the book or the top of the book and 15 centimeters from the bottom. I'm also adding 2 tapes spaced evenly in between. The tapes are, you can use either linen or cotton. I'm using cotton 1/2 inch ribbon. For the tape, it helps in the binding process, helps strengthen the book as when you sew the signatures together. I made a video recently on a 4-in-1 book press, sewing frame, finishing press, guillotine press for bookbinding. I wasn't happy with the outcome. I have changed it up a bit. However, the sewing frame portion of this 4-in-1, I'm very happy with. So I'm putting it together here. And you'll see the 2 ribbons that I've attached to simplify the sewing process. So I'm using a kettle stitch to sew this book together, sew the signatures of the book together. I am using a linen thread, and through one end, stitch the ribbons together. You want it fairly tight, not too tight. And when you are tightening, pull them in opposite directions. Pulling it together inwards will rip the book. However, when you get to the end of the second signature, you tie the 2 pieces together. You tie the 2 ends of the thread together. When you come to the end of the third signature, how do I describe this? You loop the needle through the previous section and up into the end of the third signature, this ties the ends together. I'm just showing it here. Demonstrating it is much easier than describing it. So you go through the process. With each section or each signature, make sure that it's tight, not too tight. You want to keep it properly bound together. You don't want a loose thread. That'll ruin the whole process. So you want to keep it fairly tight. And when you come to the end, you give it a loop and you tie the end of the thread together. The tightness, you should be able to pull the tape, the linen or cotton tape, back and forth slightly. You don't want it too loose and you don't want it too tight. So once all the signatures are bound, put the book in a press and use the glue. I'm using a PVA glue, archival quality, non-acidic, to glue the end of the book together. Cover it properly, thoroughly. However, do not get glue on the tape at this time. You still want the tape to move back and forth. After the glue dried, I'm just rounding the ends of the book. It's not that thick, so I'm not going to get a big rounding on it. The end of the book, you want it rounded a bit. I'm just using a hammer. I did nicely file the end of the hammer, make it nice and clean. This was an old hammer and I rounded the end. There are hammers for bookmaking. A lot of people use cobbler's hammers. I just took an old hammer that I had, sanded the end, sanded the head, rounded the head. It was nice and clean. I rounded it a bit. You just pound the ends of the book on each side, just rounding it, not too hard, gently. It does round, and the glue has some sway in it. So after the rounding process, we're going to get the book into the finishing press. We're going to give it another coat of PVA glue. We cover the tape at this point, and I'm putting some headbands on. After the tape is attached, I am adding a sheet of muslin to the back. People use linen, people use muslin, some people call it mull. You can use cotton. I'll be honest, I purchased this from the dollar store. You want it about 1.5 inches, 2 inches on either end of the book, including the ends. So I've got it, mine's about, 3 inches wide. I will add it to the end of the book. I will use a bone folder to get it properly attached and into the creases of the tape, and I'll give another coat of PVA on top. I missed recording a section here. I made some end papers. End papers are the blank pages or blank leaves at the beginning and the end of the book. The end papers are normally heavier weight than the rest of the book or the rest of the text block. That is other than the paste down. The paste down is the portion of the book that's attached to the cover. It basically attaches the text block to the cover. Let me just show you what I used here for the paste down. It's a handmade paper I purchased. I've tried marbling, I've tried making paste papers, some with success, some not so much. I decided to use a purchased paste down paper here. Anyways, here's a mistake I made. I should have attached end papers before the headbands, gluing up the spine and rounding it over. So make sure you follow the steps in order. However, I was able to get around this issue. So we tip on the first and last sections of the end papers to the text block. Tipping is another word for gluing the section on. I'm a bookmaker now. May as well use the lingo that other bookmakers use. Waste paper is just that. It's a piece of paper to avoid getting glue all over the place. It's basically, you use it once, you throw it out. I took a few old textbooks that I had, detached all the pages from it. I cut the string from the stitching. Each textbook gave me hundreds of sheets of waste paper. So the 3mm strip of PVA to the end paper sections. You line the end paper very carefully with the spine of the book, attach it properly, then turn it over and repeat the process to the back of the book. We're adding another lining to the spine. I'm adding some craft paper after applying the glue. After applying another layer of PVA to the spine. This time we're going to go over the headbands as well. It will take a fair bit of PVA as we want to fill in the gaps of the weave of the scrim. The scrim is that mold. Make sure we get all the grooves and the crevices. So again, we rub it down under a piece of rubbing paper and we try to work these little creases out and try to get it nice and smooth. So what is the casing of a book? The casing of a book refers to its cover or outer binding. It includes the front cover, the spine, and the back cover. The covers are basically or typically made of cardboard or chipboard. The casing obviously protects the pages of the book and provides a surface for the book's title, author name, so on and so forth, artwork, design elements, whatever you want to include. Needless to say, hardcover books have a more rigid casing and the paperbacks have a softer casing. So here's a layout of our casing. As I mentioned, the outer cover will be a book cloth made out of fabric. That is the white portion that you see. And you see the front cover, the spine, and the back cover. I am using a chipboard for the front and back cover, about 2.2 millimeters in thickness. And the spine is just going to be some cardboard. We're going to glue the cardboard, the spine cardboard, and the front and back covers to the cloth with PVA glue. Some people use a mix of PVA and paste as it takes longer to dry. You can adjust the book if you have it off center. If PVA, it's more difficult. It dries quicker. So we glue those to the cloth, the front cover, the back cover, and the spine, after which we apply PVA glue to the wrap. We wrap one edge and then the opposite edge and then the two other edges. We want to fold the corners in. If you need to add some more PVA glue on top, just to kind of use a bone folder to tuck in the corners. It's not difficult. I just want to show you how it's done here. Okay, we're in the final stages here. I'm gluing down the ribbon, after which I'll glue down the muslin, after which I'll glue in the text block, put it under a press, let it sit overnight, and we're done. Let me just go over a few items here. I made this book in my workshop. My workshop isn't the cleanest of spaces in the house. It's got dust and dirt all over the place. I initially pressed the book, the text block, in between the bench vise, which isn't the cleanest tool either. And in doing so, I got some nicks and dings in the book into the text block. So when you're making your book, make sure it's in a clean spot. You want a nice, clean product in the end. Also, follow the sequence, follow the steps in making a book. I did a couple of these steps out of order. Wasn't a biggie, I was able to correct it, but it could cost you. If you're new to this process, if you don't have it memorized, if you're not an expert, and if you're not an expert, and if you are an expert, you're not watching this video anyway, have the steps written down in front of you. Make sure you're doing them in order. It's really important. Something else I realized here is when you're cutting your pages or when you're cutting your chipboard, the cover of the book, make sure you have a nice clean blade. If your blade has the smallest inkling of getting dull, just snap it off and use a new one. The book I made, I wanted to keep it, I don't know, call it generic. I didn't want the clean, sharp edges at the end. You know how when you look at the book from the side, it's nice and flat. You know, the experts use a guillotine. If you're cutting it, if you want a nice clean edge, make sure you press it down firmly and make sure you have a clean, sharp knife. You usually see a small indentation between the spine and the cover. You know what I'm talking about. I didn't have that here. I kept it too tight. So when you're applying the chipboard and when you're applying the spine, make sure you leave space to have that indentation. Lastly, it was quite enjoyable making this book. I really had a good time. I learned a lot. You don't need a hoard of tools. It takes some practice. The book I made here wasn't perfect. And I will take further journeys into the art of bookmaking. So that's it. Thanks for joining. See you guys soon. Appreciate the view. Bye.